Look what the storm dragged in. Captain Wade Bronson's voice cut through the blizzard like a blade, his massive frame blocking the patrol car's headlights. Snow clung to his military green camouflage jacket as he towered over the bound figure at his feet. Little Miss Perfect thought she was so clever, didn't she? Detective Skylar Thorne struggled against the zip ties binding her wrists behind her back, her long neon blue hair whipping in the Arctic wind. Blood trickled from her split lip, but her emerald eyes burned with defiance even as hypothermia began to set in. Her torn, deep V-neck military green t-shirt and dark army pants offered little protection against the brutal cold. "The great Detective Thorne," Bronson continued mockingly, kicking at the massive German shepherd lying motionless beside her. The dog's tactical harness was soaked with blood, his breathing shallow but steady. 3 years playing undercover, and you never suspected your own captain was the one feeding intel to the Ravens. Skylar's worn brown combat boots scraped against the frozen ground as she tried to position herself between Bronson and her canine partner. "You're a disgrace to the badge," she whispered through chattering teeth. Bronson's laughter was harsh and cruel. "Badge? This badge pays me $1,200 a month to chase speeders and break up bar fights. The Ravens pay me $50,000 to look the other way while they move product through my jurisdiction." He crouched down, his breath visible in the frigid air. "You should have minded your own business." 10 miles away, Navy SEAL Jackson Steele was securing his remote cabin against the storm, unaware that in 20 minutes, a faint sound in the distance would change everything. If you believe that sometimes heroes emerge from the darkest storms, hit that subscribe button right now. We need to know you're with us for this incredible journey of survival, betrayal, and redemption that's about to unfold. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you found someone abandoned in a blizzard? The wind screamed through the Rocky Mountain peaks like a banshee, carrying with it the promise of death. Jackson Steele had weathered storms in Afghanistan, survived firefights in Syria, and endured interrogation training that would break most men. But this Colorado blizzard was something else entirely. A force of nature that didn't care about his military decorations or specialist training. He moved through his cabin with practiced efficiency, checking the storm shutters one final time. Each action was deliberate, economical, the product of 15 years in naval special warfare, where wasted motion could mean the difference between mission success and body bags. The satellite phone on his kitchen counter crackled with static as the National Weather Service updated their dire predictions. Winds gusting to 80 miles per hour, temperature dropping to -20, visibility near zero. This was supposed to be his sanctuary. 3 weeks of leave in the Colorado wilderness, no classified briefings, no tactical operations, no responsibility for anyone's life but his own. The cabin had cost him most of his savings, but it offered something the military couldn't: absolute solitude. Here, he could silence the voices of the men he'd lost, the faces that haunted his dreams, the weight of command decisions that had sent other people's sons and daughters home in flag-draped coffins. The scream that cut through the storm's howl was so faint, he almost missed it. Jackson froze mid-step, his hand hovering over the cabin's deadbolt. In hostile territory, you learn to distinguish between the sounds that meant nothing and the sounds that meant everything. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't an animal. This was human terror, raw and desperate, carried on the Arctic air like a distress signal. His body shifted automatically into operational mode. The relaxed civilian posture disappeared, replaced by the coiled alertness of a predator. He grabbed his tactical flashlight and winter gear, muscle memory overriding the part of his brain that reminded him he was on leave. The voice belonged to a woman, and she was in trouble. The storm tried to knock him down the moment he stepped outside. Snow struck his face like frozen needles, and the wind threatened to tear the breath from his lungs. He'd operated in worse conditions, but never voluntarily. The beam of his flashlight barely penetrated 5 feet through the swirling white chaos, but he pressed forward, following his instincts and the fading echo of that scream. What he found, half buried in a snowdrift beside a cluster of pine trees, defied immediate comprehension. 2 figures lay motionless in the snow, their dark forms barely visible against the white landscape. The first was a woman, unconscious, her distinctive blue hair now crusted with ice and blood. Her clothes were torn, her hands bound behind her back with professional zip ties that bit deep into her wrists. But it was the second figure that made Jackson's blood run cold. The German Shepherd was massive, easily 90 pounds of muscle and bone, lying protectively beside the woman even in unconsciousness. The dog's tactical harness was military grade, the kind used by specialized canine units in combat zones. Blood matted its fur, and its breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps that spoke of serious internal injuries. But even unconscious, the animal's body was positioned between the woman and any potential threat. Jackson knelt in the snow, his tactical mind processing the scene while his training kicked in. This wasn't a random attack. The zip ties were applied with professional precision. The woman's injuries suggested systematic interrogation rather than opportunistic violence. And the K9's protective positioning indicated a bond forged in high-stress situations that went far beyond civilian pet ownership. He checked the woman's pulse first, thready but present. Her core temperature was dangerously low, hypothermia setting in fast. The dog whined softly when Jackson approached, a sound more heartbreaking than any human cry for help. These weren't random victims of the storm. They were casualties of something much more dangerous. The tactical assessment took less than 30 seconds. He couldn't save both simultaneously, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. The woman was smaller, lighter, but the K9 was bleeding internally and might not survive being moved twice. Military logic said save the human first, but the dog's tactical gear suggested it might be as valuable as its handler. Jackson made his decision with the cold efficiency that had kept his team alive through 12 deployments. He scooped the woman into his arms, noting the lean muscle definition beneath her wet clothes and the calloused hands that spoke of weapons training. She was unconscious but not dead weight. Her body had the compact efficiency of someone accustomed to full physical demands. The trek back to the cabin was a nightmare of wind and driving snow. Each step was a battle against the storm's fury, his boots sinking deep into drifts that threatened to swallow him whole. The woman's breathing was shallow against his chest, her body temperature dropping with each passing minute. He could feel her life slipping away as surely as warmth bled from exposed skin in sub-zero wind. He deposited her on his couch, wrapping her in every blanket he owned, before turning back into the storm. The German Shepherd was exactly where he'd left it, but barely breathing now. Blood had pooled in the snow beneath its body, dark stains that the falling snow couldn't quite hide. Jackson gathered the animal carefully, mindful of potential internal injuries, and began the second hellish journey through the blizzard. By the time he got both victims inside and secured the cabin, Jackson's hands were numb, and his own core temperature had dropped dangerously. But basic medical training took over. The woman first, core warming, check for frostbite, assess for head trauma. Her pulse was stronger now, out of the wind, but she remained unconscious. The blue hair that had caught his attention outside was striking even matted with ice and blood, but it was her hands that told the real story. These weren't the soft hands of a civilian. Calluses on her palms spoke of extensive firearms training. Scars on her knuckles suggested hand-to-hand combat experience. And when he cut away the zip ties, the marks on her wrists indicated she'd been testing the bonds systematically, looking for weaknesses even while unconscious. This woman was a fighter. The K9 required more immediate attention. The blood wasn't from a single wound, but from multiple lacerations, probably from being dragged over rough ground. But the dog's breathing was steadier now, and its eyes tracked Geekson's movements with an intelligence that confirmed his initial assessment. This wasn't a pet. This was a working animal with specialized training. As he cleaned and bandaged the dog's wounds, Jackson noticed details that painted a picture he didn't fully understand. The tactical harness bore no identifying marks, but its construction was military grade. The woman's boots were worn but high quality, the kind issued to specialized units. And when he checked her pockets for identification, he found nothing but a small plastic card with a magnetic strip, the kind used for secure facility access. The storm raged outside his cabin for the next 6 hours. During that time, Jackson maintained watch over his unexpected guests while his mind worked through the tactical implications. Someone had tortured and abandoned these two in the middle of a blizzard, expecting the storm to finish what they'd started. The professional nature of the restraints and the systematic placement suggested military or law enforcement training. But military personnel didn't typically end up bound and left for dead by their own people. When the woman finally stirred, it was with the controlled awakening of someone trained to assess threats before revealing consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in her surroundings without moving her head. Jackson recognized the technique. It was something they taught in SEER school, a way to gather intelligence before your captors realized you were awake. "You're safe," he said quietly, keeping his hands visible and his voice calm. I found you and your partner in the snow. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. Her response was immediate and telling. Rather than the confused questions of a civilian trauma victim, she asked, "Tactical situation?" Her voice was hoarse but steady, the words precise despite her obvious pain. "Secure. Storm's passed. No hostile contact since I brought you in." Jackson answered automatically, recognizing the military communication pattern. "Who did this to you?" Skylar Thorne sat up slowly, testing her range of motion and cataloging her injuries with professional thoroughness. The hypothermia was manageable now. The lacerations were superficial. The real damage was to her operation. 3 years of undercover work blown in a single night of betrayal. "My name is Detective Skylar Thorne, Colorado State Police," she said carefully, the cover story she'd maintained for months rolling off her tongue. "I was investigating a drug trafficking organization when my cover was compromised. It was true as far as it went, but the whole truth was classified at levels that didn't officially exist. And this Navy SEAL, because she'd recognized the bearing and tactical responses that marked him as special operations, wasn't cleared for what she really was." The German shepherd, Shadow, lifted his head at the sound of her voice and attempted to rise. The effort sent a spike of pain through his injured body, but his protective instincts overrode physical discomfort. He positioned himself between Skylar and the stranger, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Easy, Shadow," Skylar commanded, her tone carrying an authority that made the dog settle immediately. "He's friendly." Jackson watched this exchange with growing interest. The woman's command presence was unmistakable, and the K-9's response suggested training that went beyond basic police work. In his experience, that level of control and trust was forged in combat, not patrol cars. "Drug trafficking," he repeated neutrally, "in the middle of a blizzard, 10 miles from the nearest road." "The Ravens aren't limited by weather," Skylar replied, testing how much she could reveal without compromising operational security. "They use storms as cover for moving product. Fewer law enforcement resources available, lower chance of interdiction." The explanation made tactical sense, but Jackson's instincts suggested there were layers to this story he wasn't hearing. The woman's bearing, the K-9's specialized training, the professional nature of their capture and abandonment, none of it quite fit a standard drug investigation. "How did you find us?" Skylar asked, deflecting attention from her own story. "Heard you scream, followed the sound." Jackson's answer was simple, factual. "Lucky timing, another hour in that storm, and you wouldn't have made it." Skylar studied his face, reading the controlled emotion behind his tactical mask. This man had killed people, had watched friends die, had made decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. She recognized the signs because she carried the same burdens. During emergency situations like this, specialized field medical equipment becomes crucial for survival. Advanced trauma response kits featuring military-grade first aid supplies, hypothermia treatment blankets, and emergency communication devices can mean the difference between life and death in extreme conditions. Professional rescue personnel rely on ruggedized tablets with satellite connectivity to coordinate emergency responses when standard communications fail. "I need to call this in," Skylar said, reaching for the satellite phone on Jackson's kitchen counter. "My department needs to know I'm alive." "Hold on." Jackson's voice carried the calm authority of command. "If your cover was blown, how do you know who you can trust? If the Ravens knew where to find you, someone fed them intel." The question hit home because it echoed Skylar's own fears. Someone in the department had sold her out. Someone with access to undercover operations, surveillance schedules, and safe house locations. Someone who knew the Ravens well enough to coordinate her capture during a blizzard when backup would be impossible. "Captain Bronson," she said finally, the name bitter in her mouth, "he's the only one who knew my exact location last night. Your captain set you up? It's the only explanation that fits." Skylar's voice carried the weight of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. 3 years undercover, building this case piece by piece. The Ravens were moving military-grade weapons through civilian networks, using drug trafficking as cover for arms dealing. "I finally had enough evidence to bring down the whole organization." She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to her jacket pocket, where an encrypted drive should have been. "They took everything. Photos, financial records, communications intercepts, 3 years of work. Gone." Jackson processed this information with the strategic mindset of someone accustomed to complex operations. An arms trafficking organization with police protection was a significant national security threat. Military weapons and civilian criminal networks meant American service members were potentially dying from their own stolen equipment. "What kind of military weapons?" he asked. "Small arms primarily, M4 variants, specialized optics, armor-piercing ammunition, but also some heavier equipment, anti-materiel rifles, explosive ordnance, communication gear." Schuyler's answer was precise, technical. The kind of equipment that goes missing from inventory and gets written off as training losses. "Someone's bleeding weapons from military stockpiles into criminal networks," Jackson concluded. "That's not just local corruption, that's organized, systematic, probably involving multiple agencies. Which is why I couldn't trust normal channels," Schuyler admitted. "This investigation required deep cover, no official support, no backup protocols. Just me and Shadow, building the case from the inside." Shadow's ears perked up at the mention of his name. Despite his injuries, the dog remained alert, scanning the cabin's entrances and windows with the systematic attention of a trained sentry. His behavior suggested familiarity with threat assessment protocols that went beyond standard police canine training. "Your dog has interesting skills," Jackson observed. "That's not normal patrol training." "Shadow's special," Schuyler replied carefully. "Rescued from a military program that was terminated. The state police adopted him when the federal government had no use for specialized detection capabilities." Again, true as far as it went. But Shadow's training included skills that weren't mentioned in any official police records. Explosive detection capabilities that could identify specific military ordnance, tracking abilities that worked across multiple terrain types, and tactical responses designed for high-threat combat environments. The satellite phone in Jackson's cabin suddenly erupted with an incoming call. The ringtone was harsh in the quiet space, cutting through their conversation like a blade. Jackson glanced at the display. Unknown number, encrypted channel. "You expecting anyone?" Schuyler asked, her hand automatically moving toward where her service weapon should have been. "No." Jackson answered the call with characteristic directness. "Steele." The voice on the other end was mechanically distorted, processed through scramblers that made identification impossible. "Mr. Steele, you have something that belongs to us." "Wrong number," Jackson replied, but his eyes locked with Schuyler's. They both understood the implications immediately. The woman and the dog, they're valuable assets that need to be returned to proper custody. Interference with our recovery operations will be considered hostile action. The line went dead. Jackson set the phone down slowly, his tactical mind already shifting to defensive protocols. Somehow, the Ravens had tracked them to his cabin, which meant they had resources and capabilities far beyond a typical criminal organization. "How long do we have?" Schuyler asked, rising from the couch despite her injuries. "Depends on their capabilities and the weather." Jackson was already moving, gathering equipment and assessing defensive positions. "If they've got satellite tracking or signals intelligence, they could be here within an hour. If they're working from ground-based assets, maybe 3 or 4. Schuyler moved to the cabin's front window, scanning the tree line with professional thoroughness. "They'll come in force this time. Bronson won't make the mistake of underestimating us again." "Us?" Jackson turned from his equipment check. "You're injured, hypothermic, and unarmed. I can't fight a tactical engagement while protecting civilians." The look Schuyler gave him carried layers of meaning he couldn't quite decipher. "Mr. Steele, I appreciate the rescue, but I'm not a civilian. And if you think Shadow and I are just going to hide while you take on the Ravens alone, you don't understand what you're dealing with." Before Jackson could respond, Shadow was at the window, his body rigid with alertness. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not the warning sound he had made earlier, but the focused aggression of a working animal detecting threats. His nose pressed against the glass, sampling scent molecules that carried information invisible to human senses. "Contact," Schuyler said simply, reading her partner's signals with practiced ease. "Multiple personnel, approaching from the northwest. They're using the storm's aftermath as cover, moving through the trees to avoid detection." Jackson grabbed his rifle from the gun safe, muscle memory guiding his hands through the loading and systems check. "How many?" "Shadows indicating at least 6 individual scent trails," Schuyler replied, her own tactical assessment overlaying the K9's sensory intelligence. "Probably more. They're moving in a coordinated pattern, suggesting military training." "The Ravens have ex-military personnel?" "More than that." Schuyler's voice carried grim certainty. "The Ravens are ex-military personnel. Special operations, private contractors. soldiers who got discharged for reasons the military doesn't discuss publicly. They're not just criminals, they're professionals. The pieces of the tactical picture were falling into place, and Jackson didn't like what he was seeing. A corrupt police captain feeding intelligence to an organization of rogue military personnel who were stealing and selling American weapons to criminal networks. This wasn't just a local corruption case. This was a systematic assault on national security. "What's your assessment of defensive options?" he asked, recognizing Schuyler's tactical competence, even if he didn't fully understand its source. "The cabin's defensible, but not indefinitely. Single egress point, limited sight lines, no backup available." Her analysis was crisp, professional. "But they have to approach through open ground to reach us, which gives us engagement opportunities." "Rules of engagement? They have already tried to kill us once," Schuyler replied grimly. "I'd say the gloves are off." Jackson nodded, settling into the controlled mindset that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. The Ravens were about to discover that attacking a Navy SEAL in his own territory was a tactical mistake of the highest order. The pieces of the puzzle were still missing. Schuyler's cover story made sense, but didn't explain the advanced tactical knowledge she displayed, or Shadow's specialized training. The Ravens' resources suggested backing far beyond typical criminal organizations. And the systematic nature of the weapons trafficking pointed to corruption that reached into levels of government he preferred not to contemplate. But those were strategic questions for later. Right now, there were professionals moving through the Colorado wilderness with lethal intent, and Jackson had 2 wounded allies who needed protection. The Navy SEAL in him took over, pushing aside questions in favor of immediate tactical requirements. "Shadow down," Schuyler commanded, and the German Shepherd immediately dropped into a prone position behind the cabin's heaviest furniture. Even injured, the dog understood combat protocols and sought cover without being directed to specific positions. "You know tactical commands?" Jackson observed, checking his rifle's optics. "Basic stuff," Schuyler replied, but her tone suggested there was more to the story. Shadow's training included some specialized capabilities that required handler familiarity with military protocols. Again, the careful truth that revealed nothing classified. But Jackson was beginning to recognize a pattern in her responses. Precise, factual, but edited for content that stayed within acceptable disclosure limits. The kind of operational security discipline that was beaten into soldiers in specialized units. The first sign of contact was a flash of light reflecting off optical equipment in the tree line. Someone with binoculars or a rifle scope was conducting surveillance of the cabin, probably assessing defensive positions and identifying potential targets. Jackson noted the location and began his own counter-surveillance, using his scope to scan for additional positions. 2 on the ridge, 40 degrees northwest, he murmured. Probable overwatch element. Movement in the deadfall, 60 degrees north, Schuyler added, her eyes tracking shadows that moved differently than wind-blown branches. At least 3 personnel, moving in tactical bounds. They were communicating in the shorthand of professionals who understood battlefield dynamics. But there was still something about Schuyler's situational awareness that exceeded what he'd expect from a state police detective, even one with specialized training. The attack, when it came, was coordinated and professional, suppressing fire from multiple positions, movement under cover, tactical communication that spoke of extensive training and experience. These weren't criminals playing soldier, these were soldiers who had chosen criminality. Jackson's first shot took out the overwatch position on the ridge, his bullet finding its target despite the distance and wind conditions. The suppressed rifle barely whispered, but the effect was immediate. The systematic fire pattern from the tree line faltered as the spotters were eliminated. Schuyler had found his backup pistol and moved to the cabin's rear window, covering the blind spot in Jackson's field of fire. Her movement was fluid, economical, the kind of tactical positioning that came from training under live fire conditions. When she engaged targets, her shots were precise and controlled. 2 to the chest, assess, move to the next threat. "Where did a state police detective learn to shoot like that?" Jackson called out between engagements. "Specialized training," Schuyler replied, dropping an advancing Raven with a headshot that spoke of extensive marksmanship experience. "The state police have access to federal training programs for certain kinds of investigations." True, but incomplete. The shooting skills she was displaying required thousands of rounds of practice and live fire experience that couldn't be acquired in standard law enforcement training. This was combat shooting, refined through repetition and tested under conditions where failure meant death. The firefight lasted 12 minutes, long enough to demonstrate that both sides were dealing with professionals, short enough to suggest that the Ravens had underestimated the defensive capabilities they were facing. When the shooting stopped, 6 Ravens lay dead in the Colorado snow, and the survivors had melted back into the forest like ghosts. But Jackson knew this was just the first probe. Professional tactical teams didn't commit their entire force to a reconnaissance in force. They were testing defenses, assessing capabilities, and gathering intelligence for a follow-up assault that would be larger and more sophisticated. "They'll be back," he said, reloading his rifle and scanning the tree line for signs of continued surveillance. "Within 6 hours," Skylar agreed, checking her ammunition and making mental notes about sight lines and defensive positions. "But next time they'll bring heavier firepower and more personnel. The pieces of this puzzle are falling into place, but the biggest revelations are still coming. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below." The tactical situation had clarified their immediate options, none of them particularly appealing. They could attempt to flee through wilderness territory that favored the attackers. They could try to call for backup that might or might not be compromised, or they could prepare for a siege against opponents with superior numbers and equipment. "There's something you need to know," Skylar said during the brief lull between attacks. "The Ravens aren't just stealing military weapons, they're selling them to foreign networks. Organized crime, terrorist organizations, anyone willing to pay premium prices for American military technology." The intelligence hit Jackson like a physical blow. American weapon systems in the hands of terrorists meant American soldiers were potentially dying from their own stolen equipment. Special operations teams were facing improvised explosive devices built with American ordnance. This wasn't just criminal corruption, this was treason on a scale that threatened national security. "How do you know this?" he asked. 3 years undercover," Skylar replied. "I've seen the shipping manifests, the payment records, the communication intercepts. The Ravens have contacts in 12 countries and move approximately $50 million worth of stolen military equipment annually." $50 million? Jackson's tactical mind processed the implications. That's not opportunistic theft. That's systematic, organized, probably involving multiple agencies and hundreds of personnel. "Which is why my investigation required such deep cover," Skylar said. "Normal law enforcement channels were compromised at levels we couldn't determine. I had to build the case from the inside, without official support or backup protocols." The picture was becoming clearer, and it painted a strategic threat that went far beyond local corruption. If Skylar's intelligence was accurate, the Ravens represented a criminal organization with military capabilities and international connections that posed a direct threat to American national security. But there were still pieces missing. Skylar's tactical competence exceeded what he'd expect from even the most specialized police training. Shadow's capabilities suggested military working dog training that wasn't available through civilian agencies, and the systematic nature of her intelligence gathering indicated resources and clearances that didn't typically extend to state police detectives. "Skylar," he said carefully, "what aren't you telling me?" Before she could answer, Shadow was at the window again, his body language indicating immediate threat detection. This time, however, his positioning was different, not the general alertness of before, but the focused aggression of a working dog that had identified specific targets. "Contact front," Skylar announced, reading Shadow's signals. "Heavy weapons team, range 400 meters. Jackson's scope confirmed what the K-9 had detected. A team of 6 Ravens was setting up what appeared to be a crew-served weapon, probably a machine gun or automatic grenade launcher. At that range, they could suppress the cabin with overwhelming firepower, while additional teams moved in for the final assault. "We need to break contact," Jackson said, his tactical assessment running through increasingly limited options. "That position gives them dominant terrain and superior firepower." "Agreed," Skylar replied, but her tone carried the weight of operational considerations he couldn't see. "But there's something else. If the Ravens are willing to commit this level of resources to eliminate us, it means they're protecting something larger than just their local operations." "What do you mean?" "The weapons trafficking is lucrative, but it's not worth this kind of exposure," Skylar explained, her tactical analysis overlaying broader strategic considerations. "They're risking federal attention, military investigation, international intelligence focus. The only reason to take that risk is if we've stumbled onto something that threatens their entire organization." The implication was clear. Whatever Skylar had discovered during her 3 years undercover was significant enough that the Ravens were willing to commit military-grade resources to ensure it never saw the light of day, which meant the intelligence she carried was potentially worth more than individual lives or operational security. "What did you find?" Jackson asked. "Evidence that goes beyond weapons trafficking," Skylar replied, her voice carrying the weight of classified information she couldn't fully share. "Communications intercepts, financial records, personnel files that suggest the Ravens are operating as a privatized military organization with contracts that extend beyond criminal activities." "Contracts with whom?" "That's the part I couldn't verify before my cover was blown," Skylar admitted. "But the funding sources suggest government connections, possibly foreign, possibly domestic agencies operating outside official channels. Remote mountain properties offer unique investment opportunities for those seeking privacy and security. Premium isolated cabins with strategic positioning provide excellent returns through luxury vacation rentals and corporate retreat facilities. Professional real estate consultants specializing in off-grid properties help clients identify high-value mountain real estate with access to hiking trails, hunting grounds, and scenic wilderness areas perfect for executive retreats." The machine gun opened up before Jackson could fully process the implications of what Skylar had revealed. Heavy caliber rounds tore through the cabin's wooden walls, sending splinters and debris flying through the interior space. The systematic fire pattern was designed to suppress defensive positions, while follow-up teams moved into assault positions. Jackson grabbed Skylar and Shadow, pulling them into the cabin's most protected corner, while his mind raced through defensive options. The Ravens had escalated to military-grade weapons, which meant they were past the point of caring about official attention or collateral damage. They wanted Skylar and her intelligence eliminated, regardless of the cost. "Basement!" he shouted over the hammering gunfire. "Emergency egress route through the foundation." Skylar nodded, understanding immediately. The cabin's construction included tactical features that weren't visible from casual inspection: reinforced walls, multiple escape routes, and defensive positions that suggested Jackson had planned for exactly this kind of scenario. They moved through the cabin's lower level as machine gun rounds chewed through the structure above them. Shadow followed with professional precision despite his injuries, his training overriding physical discomfort in favor of operational requirements. The K-9's behavior suggested familiarity with combat environments that extended beyond police work. The escape tunnel emerged 50 meters from the cabin, concealed beneath a natural depression that provided defilade from the Ravens' overwatch positions. Jackson had spent weeks preparing these defensive measures, but he had never expected to use them against a team of rogue military professionals armed with crew-served weapons. As they emerged from the tunnel, the cabin exploded behind them. The Ravens had committed heavy ordnance, probably rocket-propelled grenades or demolition charges, to ensure complete destruction of any intelligence that might have remained inside. The blast shook the ground beneath their feet and sent a column of smoke and flame into the Colorado sky. "They're not taking chances," Skylar observed, watching the cabin burn. "That was overkill designed to eliminate evidence rather than just neutralize threats." "Which confirms your assessment," Jackson repeated, leading them toward a secondary defensive position he'd prepared in the surrounding terrain. "They're protecting something larger than local operations." The Ravens' systematic approach to eliminating witnesses and evidence suggested an organization with resources and connections that extended far beyond typical criminal enterprises. Military-grade weapons, sophisticated tactical coordination, and willingness to commit heavy ordnance in civilian territory indicated backing from sources that weren't concerned with normal legal or operational constraints. But as they moved through the Colorado wilderness, Jackson found himself studying his unexpected allies with growing questions. Skylar's movement through difficult terrain was too smooth for someone who'd spent 3 years behind a desk building an investigation. Shadow's tactical responses suggested training protocols that weren't available through civilian agencies. And the systematic way they both processed and responded to combat stress indicated experience that went beyond law enforcement operations. "Skylar," he said, as they reached the defensive position, "I need to know who you really are." She turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd rescued her from the storm, her carefully constructed cover story wavered. The professional mask slipped just enough to reveal something beneath, a operational discipline and tactical competence that spoke of training and experience at levels that didn't officially exist. I told you, she said carefully. Detective Skylar Thorne, Colorado State Police. Detective Skylar Thorne doesn't move like special operations, Jackson replied. Detective Skylar Thorne doesn't shoot like special operations. And Detective Skylar Thorne's canine partner doesn't respond to tactical commands that aren't taught in civilian training programs. Shadow's ears perked up at the tension in their voice, but his attention remained focused on the burning cabin and the Ravens who were undoubtedly regrouping for follow-up operations. Even injured and exhausted, the dog maintained professional alertness that suggested training under conditions where relaxation could mean death. Some investigations require specialized capabilities, Skylar replied, maintaining her cover story, but acknowledging that Jackson had identified discrepancies she couldn't fully explain without revealing classified information. How specialized? Jackson pressed. Because right now, we're facing a threat that requires more than basic law enforcement response. If you've got capabilities that could help us survive the next assault, I need to know about them. The tactical situation had reached a point where operational security considerations had to be weighed against immediate survival requirements. Skylar could maintain her cover story and risk their deaths, or reveal information that could save their lives but compromise years of classified operations. Hold on to your seats because what happens next will completely change everything you think you know about this story. If you're as shocked as we are, hit that notification bell so you never miss moments like this. Before Skylar could answer, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the morning air. The Ravens were escalating again, bringing aviation assets to bear on what should have been a simple elimination mission. Through the trees, they could see a military-style helicopter conducting search patterns over the burning cabin site. Thermal imaging, Jackson said, recognizing the aircraft's systematic flight pattern. They're looking for heat signatures that survive the explosion. How long before they find us? Skylar asked, pulling Shadow deeper into the natural concealment of their position. Minutes, Jackson replied grimly. Maybe less if they've got advanced sensors. The helicopter's search pattern was methodical and professional, covering ground with the systematic thoroughness of military personnel trained in tactical reconnaissance. This wasn't a hastily organized criminal operation. This was a coordinated military assault, using aviation assets and sophisticated sensor equipment. As the aircraft passed overhead, Shadow's behavior changed dramatically. Instead of the cautious alertness he'd maintained throughout their flight from the cabin, he became focused and aggressive in a way that suggested recognition. His body language indicated not just threat detection, but identification of specific threats that triggered trained responses. Shadow knows that aircraft, Skylar said, reading her partner's signals with practiced ease. He's reacting to something specific about the helicopter or its crew. How could a police K-9 have prior contact with the Ravens? Jackson asked. Because Shadow's training history includes capabilities that weren't developed for civilian law enforcement, Skylar admitted, her carefully constructed cover story finally beginning to crack under the pressure of immediate tactical requirements. The helicopter completed its search pattern and moved toward their position, its thermal imaging equipment probably detecting their heat signatures through the forest canopy. In less than a minute, they would be exposed to direct fire from aviation-mounted weapons systems. Jackson made a tactical decision based on immediate survival requirements. Whatever your real background is, we need those capabilities now. The Ravens have escalated beyond anything standard law enforcement can handle. Skylar looked at him for a long moment, weighing operational security against the lives of everyone involved. The systematic destruction of the cabin, the military-grade weapons, and the commitment of aviation assets suggested the Ravens were past the point of caring about exposure or official attention. They wanted her dead regardless of the cost, which meant her classified background was probably compromised anyway. My real name is Major Skylar Thorne, Joint Special Operations Command, she said finally, the words carrying the weight of years spent in deep cover operations. Shadow and I were inserted into civilian law enforcement 3 years ago to investigate military weapons trafficking that appeared to involve active duty personnel and classified procurement programs. The revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. Joint Special Operations Command was the most classified level of American military operations, the people who conducted missions that didn't officially exist and eliminated threats that couldn't be addressed through conventional channels. If JSOC had inserted operatives into civilian law enforcement, it meant the weapons trafficking threatened national security at the highest levels. JSOC doesn't conduct domestic operations, he said. his understanding of military law warring with the evidence in front of him. Officially, no, Schuyler agreed. But when military weapons are being sold to terrorist organizations through networks that include active-duty American personnel, the threat assessment changes. Shadow and I were tasked with identifying the source of the leaks and neutralizing the threat through whatever means necessary. The helicopter was directly overhead now, its thermal sensors locked onto their position. In seconds, it would begin engagement with weapons systems designed to eliminate ground targets with overwhelming firepower. "What did you find?" Jackson asked urgently. "The Ravens aren't just stealing weapons," Schuyler replied, her voice carrying the weight of intelligence that it could reshape American military security. "They're selling classified technical specifications, operational protocols, and personnel information to foreign intelligence services. The weapons trafficking is just one component of a systematic espionage operation that's been compromised American military operations for over 5 years. Before Jackson could fully process the implications, Shadow was moving. The German Shepherd bolted from their concealed position with purpose that suggested training for exactly this scenario. Instead of fleeing from the helicopter, he was moving toward it with the focused aggression of a working dog executing specialized commands. "Shadow recall!" Schuyler shouted, but the K-9 ignored her command for the first time since Jackson had observed them together. The reason became clear 30 seconds later, when the helicopter's engines suddenly sputtered and failed. The aircraft dropped like a stone, its rotors auto-rotating as the pilot fought to control what had become an emergency landing situation. The helicopter crashed into the forest 200 meters from their position, its crew stunned but alive. "What just happened?" Jackson demanded. "Shadow's specialized training includes sabotage capabilities," Schuyler explained, her professional admiration for her partner evident despite the tactical chaos around them. "He was trained to disable aircraft by targeting specific mechanical vulnerabilities. A dog that can sabotage helicopters? JSOC working dogs receive training that goes far beyond standard military programs," Schuyler replied. "Shadow can identify and neutralize specific types of equipment, vehicles, and weapons systems. He's essentially a four-legged special operations asset." The crashed helicopter had eliminated the Ravens' aviation advantage, but it had also revealed their position to any ground teams that were coordinating with the air assets. Within minutes, they would be facing a concentrated assault from personnel who now knew exactly where to find them. But the tactical situation had also clarified something important. Schuyler's revelation about her true identity and mission changed everything Jackson understood about the threat they were facing. This wasn't just a criminal corruption case. This was a national security crisis involving systematic espionage and the sale of classified American military capabilities to foreign powers. "How much evidence do you have?" he asked. 3 years' worth, Schuyler replied. "Financial records, communication intercepts, personnel files, operational protocols, everything necessary to identify the entire network and neutralize the threat to American military operations. Where is it?" "Memorized," she said simply. "The digital files were destroyed when they captured us, but the intelligence is still intact," which explained why the Ravens were willing to commit such extensive resources to eliminating her. Schuyler represented not just a threat to their criminal operations, but to a systematic espionage network that had been compromising American military security for years. The intelligence she carried could reshape American military operations and prevent future casualties from classified information being sold to hostile powers. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through their conversation. The Ravens were moving ground teams into position for a final assault, probably coordinating with the downed helicopter crew to ensure complete elimination of all witnesses and intelligence. "How many personnel are we looking at?" Jackson asked, his tactical mind processing defensive options for what was becoming an increasingly hopeless situation. "The Ravens organization includes approximately 200 active personnel," Schuyler replied. Her intelligence assessment painted a grim picture of their chances. "Primarily ex-military, special operations backgrounds, organized into fire teams with sophisticated equipment and tactical coordination." 200? "But they won't commit their entire force to this operation," she continued. "Probably 20 to 30 personnel maximum, with heavy weapons and aviation support." The odds were still overwhelming, but they were moving from impossible to merely suicidal. Jackson began calculating ammunition requirements, engagement ranges, and defensive positions that could maximize their tactical advantage while the Ravens closed in around them. But as he prepared for what might be their final battle, one question continued to nag at his tactical consciousness. If Skylar was JSOC and her mission was classified at the highest levels, why was she operating without backup or extraction protocols? Elite Special Operations didn't typically abandon their personnel to operate without support in hostile territory. "Major," he said formally, recognizing her true rank and background, "where's your backup?" The question hit home because it touched on operational realities that Skylar had been avoiding since her cover was blown. JSOC operations included extensive backup and extraction protocols designed to ensure personnel survival even in the worst-case scenarios. The fact that she was isolated and unsupported suggested either mission failure or something much worse. "Compromised," she said finally. "Someone in the command structure has been feeding information to the Ravens. My backup protocols were turned into elimination orders." The revelation painted an even darker picture of the threat they were facing. If the Ravens had penetrated JSOC command structures, it meant the espionage network extended into the highest levels of American military operations. Skylar wasn't just investigating weapons trafficking. She had uncovered systematic treason that threatened the entire structure of American national security. "How high does it go?" Jackson asked. "That's what I was trying to determine when my cover was blown," Skylar replied. "But the evidence suggests command level, possibly flag officer involvement." The sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the crashed helicopter. The Ravens were eliminating their own injured personnel rather than risk them being captured and interrogated. The systematic execution of their own people suggested an organization with operational security protocols that prioritized mission success over individual survival. "They're cleaning up loose ends," Skylar observed, recognizing the tactical significance of the gunfire, "which means they're about to make their final push," Jackson concluded. "No witnesses, no evidence, no survivors." But as they prepared for the Ravens' assault, Shadow had detected something else. The K-9's behavior indicated multiple threat signatures approaching from different directions. Not just the obvious ground teams, but additional contacts that suggested a more complex tactical situation. "Multiple contacts," Skylar announced, reading Shadow's signals. "Ravens from the north and west, but also unknown personnel from the south." Unknown personnel? Could be law enforcement backup, military response, or additional Raven teams, she replied. Shadow can't distinguish friendly from hostile based on scent alone. The tactical picture was becoming increasingly complex, with multiple unknown forces converging on their position. But one factor remained constant. Skylar carried intelligence that could expose an espionage network threatening American military operations, and she was the only person who could ensure that information reached the proper authorities. As the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, Jackson made a decision that would define the rest of his military career. Whatever happened next, Major Skylar Thorne and the intelligence she carried had to survive. The systematic treason she had uncovered threatened not just American military operations, but the lives of every service member who depended on classified information remaining classified. The Ravens might have superior numbers, better equipment, and aviation support, but they were about to face a Navy SEAL defending a JSOC operative with intelligence that could save American lives. That was a tactical situation that changed the entire nature of the engagement. The final battle was about to begin, but the stakes had been clarified. This wasn't just about survival. This was about protecting classified intelligence that could prevent American soldiers from dying because their enemies had purchased American military secrets from traitors wearing American uniforms. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with the rumble of approaching vehicles. Through the trees, Jackson could see the glint of metal and glass as a convoy of black SUVs wound through the Forest Service roads that shouldn't have been accessible to civilian traffic. The Ravens had brought serious hardware to finish what the helicopter had started. "Contact front, 8 vehicles," Skylar reported, her scope tracking the lead elements of the assault force. "Tactical formation, probably 40 personnel with crew-serve weapons." Shadow moved between them with purpose that belied his injuries, his massive frame positioning to provide early warning while maintaining protection for his wounded handler. The German Shepherd's tactical awareness had proven invaluable throughout their running battle, but now his behavior suggested something different, not just threat detection, but recognition. "Shadow's reacting to specific scents," Skylar observed, reading the subtle changes in her partner's posture and attention. He's identified personnel from previous contact. Ravens he's encountered before? Possibly. Or, Schuyler paused, processing implications that painted an even darker picture of their situation. Personnel from my original JSOC team. The revelation hit Jackson like a tactical assessment gone wrong. If Shadow was recognizing sense from Schuyler's original military team, it meant the betrayal went deeper than corrupt local law enforcement. Someone from her own unit, people she had trusted with her life, had sold her out to the Ravens. How many people knew your real mission? Jackson asked, his sniper training automatically cataloging defensive positions while his mind worked through the strategic implications. 6, Schuyler replied grimly. My team leader, 2 support personnel, and 3 command staff, all with top-secret clearances, all supposedly vetted for integrity and loyalty. The tactical math was brutally simple. One of 6 people with access to the most classified military operations in American service was working for an organization that sold American military secrets to foreign powers. The systematic nature of the betrayal suggested it wasn't opportunistic corruption, but deliberate, long-term espionage that had been compromising American operations for years. The lead SUV stopped 400 meters from their position, and armed figures began deploying with military precision. These weren't the opportunistic criminals Jackson had expected, but professional soldiers moving with the coordinated efficiency of special operations veterans. Body armor, tactical communications, weapons systems, everything about their deployment spoke of extensive training and unlimited resources. They're setting up a command post, Schuyler identified, watching the systematic establishment of communication arrays and coordination equipment. This isn't just an elimination mission, they're conducting a full tactical operation. Professional tactical training programs teach advanced survival skills essential for military and law enforcement personnel. Expert-level courses in cold weather operations, escape and evasion techniques, and crisis leadership provide the specialized knowledge that can save lives in extreme situations. Legal consultation services help officers navigate complex ethical situations while maintaining professional standards. But it was the figure emerging from the command vehicle that made Shadow's hackles rise and sent a chill through Schuyler's tactical assessment. Even at distance, she recognized the bearing and movement patterns of someone she had trusted implicitly for 3 years of classified operations. Master Sergeant Cole Marcus, she whispered, the name carrying the weight of personal betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. My team leader. Jackson adjusted his scope and confirmed her identification. The man coordinating the Raven assault wore the bearing of a professional soldier, but the tactical gear he'd chosen and the systematic way he was deploying his forces spoke of someone with access to the most advanced military training programs. This wasn't just corruption, this was treason at the highest levels of American special operations. He was supposed to be my backup, Schuyler continued, her voice carrying the hollow sound of trust shattered beyond repair. The one person who knew my exact location, my communication schedules, my extraction protocols. The tactical picture was becoming clearer, and it painted a systematic betrayal that had been years in the making. Marcus hadn't just sold intelligence to the Ravens, he had been feeding them classified information about JSOC operations, personnel movements, and tactical capabilities that could have compromised missions around the world. How long has he been feeding them intel? Jackson asked. Based on the Ravens' capabilities and the systematic nature of their operations, probably since the beginning of my assignment, Schuyler replied. 3 years of classified intelligence, operational protocols, and personnel information sold to the highest bidder. The implications were staggering. Every mission Schuyler's team had conducted, every classified operation they had supported, every piece of intelligence they had gathered, all of it potentially compromised by systematic treason that reached into the command structure of American Special Operations. Through his scope, Jackson watched Marcus coordinate the deployment of heavy weapons teams with the calm efficiency of someone conducting a routine training exercise. Crew-served machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, tactical communication arrays. The Ravens had brought military-grade equipment that suggested backing from sources with access to restricted weapons systems. They're not just eliminating witnesses, Jackson observed, recognizing the systematic nature of the tactical deployment. They're conducting a demonstration. Demonstration? Look at the equipment, the coordination, the systematic documentation they're conducting. Jackson's analysis painted an even more disturbing picture. This is a showcase for potential buyers. They're proving they can conduct military-grade operations using stolen American equipment and compromised intelligence. The Ravens weren't just criminal opportunists. They were operating as a privatized military organization that sold American military capabilities to foreign powers. Marcus and his team had provided the intelligence and access necessary to steal classified equipment, and now they were demonstrating those capabilities to potential customers who wanted to purchase American military effectiveness. Shadow's behavior confirmed Jackson's assessment. The German Shepherd's attention wasn't focused on the obvious threat of the assault teams, but on specific individuals whose sense triggered recognition protocols that went beyond basic threat detection. He was identifying personnel from Skylar's original JSOC team, people who were supposed to be protecting American military operations, not selling them to hostile powers. "How many of your team are down there?" Skylar asked, reading Shadow's signals with practiced expertise. "At least 3, she replied, the systematic betrayal becoming clear as she recognized movement patterns and tactical signatures that belonged to people she had served with for years. Marcus, Sergeant Torres, and probably Corporal Williams. 3 of the 6 people who had known her true mission were now coordinating a military assault designed to eliminate her and protect a systematic espionage operation that threatened American national security. The betrayal was complete, systematic, and had been planned from the moment she had accepted the assignment. The tactical communication array at the Ravens command post crackled to life, and Marcus's voice carried across the forest with the calm authority Skylar had once trusted implicitly. "Major Thorne," he called, using her real rank for the first time since her cover had been blown, "we know you're listening. This doesn't have to end badly for everyone." Skylar keyed her own communication device, using the encrypted channel that connected her to the team that had betrayed her. "Cole, I trusted you." "And I trusted the system," Marcus replied, his voice carrying no trace of regret or uncertainty. 22 years of service, and what did it get me? A pension that won't cover my mortgage and a government that sends soldiers to die for politicians who've never heard gunfire. The justification was familiar, the rationalization of corruption that painted systematic treason as patriotic resistance to governmental incompetence. But Skylar recognized the deeper truth. Marcus hadn't turned because of ideology. He had turned because someone had offered him enough money to betray everything he had sworn to protect. "How much did they pay you, Cole?" "Enough to ensure my daughter can attend college without student loans," Marcus replied. "Enough to ensure my wife receives medical care that the VA couldn't provide. Enough to matter." "How much, Cole?" $2.5 million over 3 years, he said finally, plus guaranteed protection for my family and a retirement package that includes relocation assistance to a non-extradition country. The systematic nature of the corruption was becoming clear. Someone with resources far beyond typical criminal organizations had invested millions of dollars in purchasing access to American military capabilities. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a carefully planned operation to systematically compromise American military effectiveness. "Who's paying you?" Skylar demanded. "People who understand that American military supremacy isn't sustainable indefinitely," Marcus replied. "People who are willing to pay premium prices for the intelligence and capabilities necessary to level the playing field." The answer confirmed Skylar's worst fears about the scope of the espionage operation she had uncovered. The Ravens weren't just selling weapons to criminal organizations. They were systematically transferring American military capabilities to foreign powers that wanted to neutralize American tactical advantages. But before Marcus could continue his rationalization of treason, Shadow's behavior changed dramatically. Instead of the focused alertness he had maintained throughout their conversation, he became agitated in a way that suggested recognition of immediate, specific threats that went beyond the obvious tactical situation. "New contacts," Skylar announced, reading Shadow's signals. "Multiple personnel, approaching from the south. Different scent signatures than the Ravens." Jackson adjusted his scope and confirmed what Shadow had detected. A second convoy was approaching through the forest, but their movement patterns and equipment suggested different tactical priorities. Instead of the systematic assault formation the Ravens had established, these personnel were moving with the stealth and precision of special operations conducting reconnaissance. "Friendly or hostile?" he asked. "Unknown," Skylar replied, but her tone carried hope for the first time since Marcus had revealed the scope of the betrayal. "But..." Shadowani's reaction suggests personnel he recognizes as non-hostile. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex, with multiple forces converging on their position from different directions. But one factor remained constant. Schuyler carried intelligence that could expose a systematic espionage operation that had been compromising American military security for years. Through the tactical communication array, Marcus's voice cut through their assessment with the calm efficiency of someone conducting a routine briefing. Major Thorne, you have 30 seconds to surrender yourself and the intelligence you've gathered, he announced. After that, we begin systematic elimination of all witnesses and evidence. Cole, the intelligence I've gathered proves systematic treason that reaches into JSOC command structures, Schuyler replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone presenting classified evidence to a court-martial. American soldiers are dying because you sold their operational security to hostile powers. American soldiers die because politicians send them to fight wars that can't be won with conventional tactics, Marcus countered. What I've done provides alternative funding for military capabilities that Congress won't support. The rationalization was complete and systematic. Marcus had convinced himself that selling American military secrets was actually patriotic because it provided resources that official channels couldn't deliver. But Schuyler recognized the deeper truth. Someone had spent years grooming Marcus and his team, convincing them that treason was actually service to a higher cause. Who recruited you? She asked. People who understand that American military effectiveness requires resources that go beyond official appropriations, Marcus replied. People who are willing to fund military capabilities that Congress won't support. But before he could elaborate on his systematic betrayal, the Southern contact that Shadow had detected emerged from the forest with tactical precision that spoke of specialized training and advanced equipment. 6 figures in non-standard tactical gear moved with the coordinated efficiency of special operations, but their weapons and communication equipment suggested capabilities that went beyond standard military units. The lead figure raised his hand in a tactical signal that made Schuyler's breath catch in her throat. It was a JSOC operational sign that indicated friendly contact and secure communication request, something that should have been impossible unless her original mission had backup protocols she hadn't been briefed on. Shadow, assess, Schuyler commanded, and the German Shepherd moved to a position that allowed him to analyze scent signatures from the new arrivals while maintaining tactical awareness of the Raven's position. Within seconds, Shadow's behavior confirmed what Schuyler had hoped but hadn't dared believe. His tail gave a single controlled wag, the recognition signal that indicated personnel from his original training program. These weren't Ravens or compromised personnel. These were JSOC operatives conducting a mission she hadn't known existed. The lead figure approached their position with tactical movements that demonstrated advanced training, but when he spoke, his voice carried the calm authority of someone Schuyler recognized from classified briefings she had attended at the highest levels of military command. Major Thorne, Colonel Harrison, JSOC Strategic Operations, he said, using authentication codes that confirmed his identity and clearance levels. Your extraction protocols were compromised, but we've been tracking your situation through alternative intelligence channels. Relief flooded through Schuyler's tactical consciousness, but her operational training maintained tactical awareness even as backup finally arrived. Colonel, the Ravens have compromised personnel from my original team. Master Sergeant Marcus is coordinating the assault force. Confirmed, Harrison replied. We've been investigating systematic intelligence leaks that suggested compromise at the team level. Your situation provided the evidence necessary to identify the source. You use me as bait? Schuyler asked, professional detachment warring with the personal cost of 3 years spent in deep cover without backup or extraction protocols. You volunteered for a mission that required complete operational independence, Harrison replied. But we've been monitoring the situation and gathering evidence necessary to neutralize the entire espionage network. The tactical picture was becoming clearer, but it painted a strategic operation that had used Schuyler's investigation as one component of a larger effort to identify and eliminate systematic espionage that threatened American military capabilities. Her 3 years of isolation hadn't been abandonment. They had been necessary operational security for a counterintelligence mission that reached into the highest levels of military command. But the immediate tactical situation still required resolution. The Ravens had committed significant resources to eliminating Schuyler and the intelligence she carried, and Marcus's team wasn't going to surrender just because JSOC backup had arrived. If anything, the presence of official military personnel would force them to escalate to ensure complete elimination of witnesses and evidence. "What's your tactical assessment of the Ravens' capabilities?" Harrison asked, his scope already tracking the systematic deployment of the assault force. 40 personnel, military-grade equipment, crew-served weapons, and tactical communication, Schuyler replied. They're operating as a professional military unit with resources that suggest backing from significant financial sources. Confirmed. Our intelligence indicates the Ravens have been operating as a privatized military organization with contracts that extend beyond American borders, Harrison said. They've been selling American military capabilities to foreign powers that want to neutralize our tactical advantages. The strategic implications were staggering, but the immediate tactical situation required decisions that could determine whether years of intelligence gathering would result in justice or systematic cover-up. The Ravens weren't going to surrender, and Marcus had already demonstrated his willingness to eliminate American military personnel to protect his espionage operation. Shadow's attention shifted between the two forces converging on their position, his tactical awareness providing early warning for threats that human senses couldn't detect. But his primary focus remained on the Ravens' position, where scents and sounds indicated preparation for immediate assault, regardless of the tactical complications introduced by JSOC personnel. "Colonel, the Ravens are moving," Schuyler reported, watching systematic redeployment that suggested Marcus was preparing for engagement with superior forces. "They're not going to withdraw." "Understood," Harrison replied. "Marcus knows that capture means life imprisonment or execution for treason. He'll fight to the end." The tactical assessment was brutally accurate. Marcus and his team had crossed lines that made surrender impossible. They had sold classified American military intelligence to hostile powers, compromised operations that had resulted in American casualties, and built an espionage network that threatened national security at the strategic level. For them, this firefight was literally a matter of life and death. But Jackson's scope had identified tactical options that could shift the engagement in their favor. The Ravens' systematic deployment had created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by coordinated fire from multiple positions. "Colonel, I can take the command post," he offered, his sniper training calculating range, wind conditions, and target priorities. "Eliminate Marcus and disrupt their tactical coordination." "Negative," Harrison replied. "We need Marcus alive for interrogation. His intelligence about the espionage network is critical for identifying other compromised personnel." The tactical complexity was increasing, but the strategic requirements were clear. Marcus represented a direct link to systematic espionage that had been compromising American military operations for years. His capture could provide intelligence necessary to identify other traitors and neutralize threats that extended far beyond the immediate situation. This ending will leave you speechless, but there's so much more to explore. Subscribe and click the bell icon, because our next story will show you what happens when justice meets vengeance in ways you never imagined. The assault began with systematic precision that demonstrated Marcus's extensive training and tactical experience. Suppressing fire from multiple positions, coordinated movement under cover, tactical communication that spoke of years spent conducting similar operations in hostile territory. But this time, instead of fighting foreign enemies, Marcus was targeting American personnel to protect an espionage operation that threatened national security. Harrison's team responded with the coordinated efficiency of special operations conducting a classified mission. Advanced weapon systems, tactical communication, movement patterns that demonstrated training at the highest levels of military capability. But they were outnumbered 2-1. And the Ravens had prepared defensive positions that maximized their tactical advantages. Jackson found himself caught between two professional military forces, each fighting for objectives that went far beyond individual survival. The Ravens were fighting to protect an espionage operation worth millions of dollars and systematic access to American military capabilities. Harrison's team was fighting to preserve national security and eliminate threats that had been compromising American operations for years. But it was Shadow who identified the tactical opportunity that could shift the engagement decisively. The German Shepherd's behavior indicated specific threats that required immediate attention, not just the obvious firefight between military forces, but explosive devices that the Ravens had positioned to eliminate evidence if the tactical situation deteriorated beyond their control. Demolition charges, Schuyler identified, reading Shadow's signals with expertise gained through years of working with specialized detection capabilities. Multiple devices, probably positioned to eliminate the command post and all intelligence if they lose tactical control. The revelation changed the entire tactical dynamic. Marcus wasn't just fighting to escape. He was prepared to eliminate all evidence of the espionage operation, including intelligence that could identify other compromised personnel and foreign powers that had purchased American military capabilities. "Colonel, they're going to destroy the evidence," Schuyler announced through the tactical communication channel. "Shadow's detecting explosive devices positioned around the command post." "Confirmed," Harrison replied. "Our intelligence suggested they had contingency plans for evidence destruction. How much time do we have?" "Unknown," Schuyler admitted, "but Shadow's behavior suggests the charges are prepared for immediate detonation." The tactical clock was running, and Marcus held the advantage of being willing to eliminate evidence that could expose systematic espionage, reaching into the highest levels of American military command. If he destroyed the intelligence at the command post, years of investigation could be lost, along with the ability to identify other traitors who were still actively compromising American military operations. Jackson made a tactical decision based on immediate strategic requirements. "I'm moving on the command post. Schuyler, provide overwatch. Shadow, deoct and mark explosive devices." "Negative," Harrison ordered. "Too dangerous without proper explosive ordnance disposal support." But Schuyler recognized the tactical reality that Harrison couldn't see from his position. Marcus was systematically destroying hard drives, communication devices, and classified documents that represented years of espionage evidence. Within minutes, all physical proof of the systematic betrayal would be eliminated. "Colonel, they're destroying evidence now," she reported, watching systematic elimination of intelligence that could identify foreign powers that had purchased American military capabilities. "We have minutes before everything is gone." The tactical situation demanded immediate action, but explosive devices around the command post made direct assault nearly impossible without specialized equipment and training. Standard military tactics wouldn't work when the objective was evidence preservation rather than target elimination. But Shadow's specialized training included capabilities that standard military personnel didn't possess. The German Shepherd could identify specific types of explosive devices, locate triggering mechanisms, and potentially neutralize charges without causing detonation. His detection abilities were more precise than most military equipment, and his training included sabotage techniques that could disable devices without triggering defensive mechanisms. "Shadow, reconnaissance," Schuyler commanded, and the German Shepherd moved toward the Raven's position with purpose that demonstrated years of training for exactly this type of mission. "Major, you're sending your dog into active combat?" Harrison asked, his tactical assessment recognizing both the strategic value and the enormous risk of the operation. "Shadow's trained for this," Schuyler replied, watching her partner move through the tactical environment with precision that demonstrated capabilities far beyond standard military working dogs. "He can identify and potentially neutralize explosive devices that conventional forces can't approach." Shadow's movement through the combat zone was a masterclass in tactical reconnaissance. He avoided sight lines that would expose him to enemy fire, used natural concealment to approach target areas, and conducted systematic assessment of explosive devices with capabilities that exceeded most human specialists. Within minutes, he had identified 6 separate demolition charges positioned around the command post, communication relay equipment, and document storage areas. But his training also revealed something that changed the tactical picture entirely. The explosive devices weren't just positioned for evidence destruction, but for elimination of personnel who might attempt to capture rather than kill the espionage team. Shadow's warning behavior indicated that the demolition charges were rigged with anti-handling devices designed to kill anyone who attempted to disarm them. Marcus hadn't just prepared to destroy evidence. He had prepared to eliminate anyone who tried to capture him alive. "Colonel, the explosive devices are rigged with anti-personnel charges," Schuyler reported, reading Shadow's tactical assessment. "Direct assault will result in casualties." "Can your partner disable them?" Harrison asked. "Possibly," Schuyler replied, but her tone carried the weight of a tactical decision that could cost Shadow his life. But it would require him to approach devices specifically designed to kill anyone who attempts disarmament. The tactical choice was brutal in its simplicity. Shadow could potentially disable the explosive devices and preserve evidence that could identify systematic espionage threatening American military operations. But the attempt could cost him his life, and there was no guarantee of success against devices designed by people with extensive military training. Jackson's scope tracked Marcus's systematic destruction of intelligence, while explosive charges waited to eliminate anyone who tried to stop him. Years of evidence about systematic espionage, foreign powers who had purchased American military capabilities, and compromised personnel who were still actively threatening national security. All of it could be lost if Shadow couldn't neutralize the demolition charges. "Major, it's your call," Harrison said, recognizing that only Schuyler could make the decision to risk Shadow's life for intelligence that could save American military personnel around the world. Schuyler looked at her partner, reading the intelligence and determination in Shadow's posture. The German Shepherd understood the tactical situation and the strategic importance of the mission. He was a professional military asset who had trained for years to conduct exactly this type of operation. "Shadow, demolition protocol," she commanded, authorizing him to attempt disarmament of explosive devices that could eliminate years of evidence about systematic espionage. What followed was a demonstration of specialized training that few people had ever witnessed. Shadow approached each explosive device with systematic precision, using senses that could detect triggering mechanisms, chemical signatures, and mechanical vulnerabilities that human specialists would miss. His training included capabilities that went far beyond detection. He could actually disable certain types of devices by targeting specific components. The first device was a standard military demolition charge with a timer mechanism that Shadow neutralized by severing specific wires in a sequence that demonstrated extensive training in explosive ordnance disposal. The second device included anti-handling protection that he bypassed by approaching from an angle that avoided triggering sensors. But it was the third device that demonstrated the true extent of Shadow's specialized capabilities. Instead of a conventional demolition charge, this was a sophisticated explosive device with multiple triggering mechanisms and fail-safes designed to eliminate anyone who attempted disarmament. Standard explosive ordnance disposal would require hours of careful analysis and specialized equipment. Shadow disabled it in 47 seconds. His training included understanding of electronic circuits, mechanical triggers, and chemical components that exceeded most human specialists. But more than technical knowledge, he possessed the tactical judgment necessary to assess threats and identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited without triggering defensive mechanisms. One by one, Shadow neutralized the explosive devices, while firefight continued around him. His movement through the combat zone was so precise and coordinated that most personnel didn't realize a working dog was conducting one of the most dangerous explosive ordnance disposal operations in recent military history. When the last device was neutralized, the tactical situation changed dramatically. Marcus no longer had the option of destroying evidence to protect the espionage operation. Years of intelligence about systematic betrayal were preserved, along with communications and financial records that could identify foreign powers who had purchased American military capabilities. But Marcus's response to losing his contingency plan was swift and desperate. Instead of attempting to escape or negotiate surrender, he committed his forces to a final assault designed to eliminate all witnesses, regardless of the tactical cost. "All units, execute termination protocol," Marcus ordered through the Raven's communication system. "No survivors, no evidence, no witnesses." The assault that followed was systematic and professional, but driven by desperation rather than tactical logic. The Ravens committed their entire force to eliminating Harrison's team and anyone else who could testify about the espionage operation. It was suicide tactics executed by professionals who understood that capture meant execution for treason. Harrison's response was swift and coordinated, but his team was still outnumbered and fighting against personnel with extensive special operations training. The engagement devolved into close-quarters combat that tested every aspect of military training and personal courage. But it was Jackson who identified the tactical opportunity that could end the firefight decisively. Marcus was coordinating the assault from his command post, but his position was exposed to long-range fire from Jackson's position. One shot could eliminate the Ravens' tactical coordination and potentially end the engagement. "Colonel, I have a shot on Marcus," Jackson reported through the communication channel. "Negative," Harrison replied. "We need him alive for interrogation." "Colonel, he's not going to surrender," Jackson replied, his scope tracking Marcus's systematic coordination of the assault. "He's committed to eliminating all witnesses." The tactical reality was becoming clear. Marcus would rather die fighting T than face execution for treason, and his tactical coordination was enabling the Ravens to maintain their assault despite being outnumbered by superior forces. Eliminating him could end the firefight and preserve Harrison's team, but it would also eliminate the intelligence source that could identify other compromised personnel. But Schuyler's assessment of the tactical situation provided a third option that could achieve both objectives. Colonel, Shadow can reach the command post and potentially disable Marcus without killing him. How? Shadow's trained for personnel neutralization, Schuyler explained, describing capabilities that went beyond standard military working dog training. He can disable individuals through specific techniques that cause unconsciousness without permanent injury. The tactical option was viable but dangerous. Shadow would have to move through active combat, approach a defended position, and neutralize a target who was armed and expecting attack. But his specialized training included exactly these capabilities, and his success with the explosive devices demonstrated his ability to function in high-threat environments. Major, that's asking a lot of your partner, Harrison observed. Shadow's trained for this, Schuyler replied, watching her partner's tactical assessment of the route to the command post. He understands the mission requirements. The decision point had arrived. Shadow could potentially neutralize Marcus and preserve the intelligence source necessary to identify systematic espionage, but the attempt could cost him his life. Standard tactics would require eliminating Marcus to end the firefight, but that would also eliminate years of potential intelligence about foreign powers who had purchased American military capabilities. Shadow Neutralization Protocol, Schuyler commanded, authorizing her partner to attempt the most dangerous mission of his military career. What followed was a demonstration of specialized training that redefined understanding of military working dog capabilities. Shadow moved through the combat zone with tactical precision that exceeded most human operators, using concealment and timing to approach the command post without detection. Marcus was focused on coordinating the assault when Shadow reached his position. The German Shepherd's approach was silent, systematic, and executed with training that included specific techniques for neutralizing armed personnel without triggering defensive responses. The attack lasted less than 5 seconds. Shadow approached from Marcus's blind spot, used his weight and momentum to knock the traitor off balance, and applied specific pressure to nerve clusters that caused immediate unconsciousness without permanent injury. Marcus collapsed without firing a shot or triggering any defensive mechanisms. The Ravens' assault faltered immediately as their tactical coordination disappeared. Without Marcus's leadership, individual teams began making decisions based on personal survival rather than mission objectives. Some attempted to escape, others tried to surrender, and a few continued fighting with the desperate energy of people who understood that capture meant life imprisonment. Harrison's team moved with systematic efficiency to secure prisoners and intelligence, while Schuyler and Jackson provided overwatch for Shadow's extraction from the command post. The German Shepherd had completed one of the most tactically complex missions in recent military history, preserving both human life and intelligence that could identify systematic espionage threatening American military operations. When the firefight ended, 17 Ravens were dead, 12 were captured, and one, Master Sergeant Cole Marcus, was unconscious but alive for interrogation. The command post contained 3 years' worth of intelligence about systematic espionage, including communications with foreign powers, financial records showing millions of dollars in payments, and personnel files that could identify other compromised American military personnel. But it was the personal cost that weighed most heavily on Schuyler as she knelt beside Shadow in the aftermath of the engagement. The German Shepherd had sustained additional injuries during his final mission, and his breathing was labored despite his successful completion of objectives that had seemed impossible. "You did good, partner," she whispered, her hands checking for injuries while her professional assessment cataloged the extent of his sacrifice. "You saved American lives today." Shadow's tail gave a weak thump against the ground, his eyes tracking her face with intelligence that understood both the success of the mission and the personal cost of achieving it. He had spent years training for exactly this type of operation, and his performance had exceeded every expectation of military working dog capabilities. Colonel Harrison approached as Schuyler tended to her partner, his own tactical assessment recognizing the strategic value of what had been accomplished. Major, your intelligence and Shadow's capabilities have preserved evidence that will identify systematic espionage reaching into multiple agencies. What's the scope of the compromise? Schuyler asked. Based on preliminary assessment of the captured intelligence, approximately 30 American military personnel have been selling classified information to foreign powers over the past 5 years, Harrison replied. The financial cost exceeds $200 million, but the strategic cost includes compromised operations that resulted in American casualties. The systematic nature of the espionage was staggering, but the intelligence preserved through Shadow's sacrifice could identify every compromised individual and foreign power that had purchased American military capabilities. Justice could finally be achieved for systematic treason that had been threatening national security for years. But Marcus's interrogation would reveal information that painted an even darker picture of the espionage network. As he regained consciousness under military custody, his initial responses suggested that the Ravens were just one component of a larger operation that reached into multiple countries and government agencies. The Ravens are franchised, he said during his first interrogation session, his tone carrying the bitter acceptance of someone who understood that cooperation was his only chance for avoiding execution. We're one of 12 organizations operating similar networks in different regions. 12. Harrison's interrogation technique was systematic and professional, designed to extract maximum intelligence while maintaining legal standards for evidence collection. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Marcus continued, his cooperation motivated by self-preservation rather than patriotism. Each organization operates independently, but we share intelligence and resources when necessary. The scope of the espionage network was international, systematic, and had been operating for years with access to classified military capabilities from multiple countries. American military personnel weren't the only ones who had been compromised. This was a global operation that threatened military security for every NATO member and allied nation. Who's coordinating the network? Harrison asked. Private contractors with government connections, Marcus replied. People who understand that military capabilities are commodities that can be bought and sold like any other strategic resource. The systematic nature of the espionage suggested backing from sources with resources that exceeded typical criminal organizations. This was a strategic operation designed to systematically compromise military effectiveness for nations that couldn't compete with American military capabilities through conventional means. But it was Shadow's continued deterioration that reminded everyone of the personal cost of achieving strategic objectives. The German Shepherd had sustained internal injuries during his final mission that required immediate medical attention beyond what field medics could provide. Colonel, Shadow needs advanced veterinary care, Schuyler reported, her professional assessment recognizing that her partner's condition was critical despite his successful completion of the mission. Understood, Harrison replied. We'll arrange emergency medical evacuation to the nearest facility with specialized capabilities. But Shadow's intelligence seemed to understand that his mission was complete. He had preserved evidence that could identify systematic espionage, protected American military personnel from further compromise, and ensured that justice could be achieved for years of systematic treason. His training had prepared him for exactly this type of sacrifice, and his performance had exceeded every expectation. The medical evacuation helicopter arrived within an hour, equipped with advanced life support equipment and veterinary specialists who understood the strategic value of preserving Shadow's life. But during the flight to the medical facility, Shadow's condition continued to deteriorate despite the best available care. Major, we're doing everything possible, the veterinary specialist reported, but the internal injuries are extensive, and his body has been under extreme stress for an extended period. Schuyler held Shadow's massive head in her lap during the flight, her hands providing comfort while her mind processed the reality that she might lose the partner who had shared the most dangerous assignment of her military career. 3 years of deep cover operations, systematic espionage investigation, and tactical missions that had tested every aspect of their training, all of it coming to an end as Shadow fought for his life. "Stay with me, partner," she whispered, her voice carrying promises that went beyond military regulations or operational requirements. "You've got decorations to receive, recognition to accept, retirement to enjoy." Shadow's eyes tracked her face with intelligence that understood both the gravity of his condition and the affection in her voice. His tail moved weakly, but consistently, maintaining the communication that had defined their partnership through years of dangerous operations. The medical facility's emergency response was immediate and comprehensive. Advanced surgical capabilities, specialized equipment, veterinary specialists with experience treating military working dogs who had sustained combat injuries. Everything possible was committed to preserving Shadow's life and ensuring his recovery from wounds sustained during operations that had protected American national security. The surgery lasted 6 hours. During that time, Schuyler maintained vigil in the waiting area, while Harrison coordinated follow-up operations to arrest compromised personnel identified through the Ravens' intelligence. Marcus's cooperation was providing information that could neutralize espionage networks in multiple countries, but the personal cost of achieving these strategic objectives continued to weigh on everyone involved. "Major," the veterinary surgeon said when he finally emerged from the operating room, "Shadow's surgery was successful, but his recovery will require extensive rehabilitation and ongoing medical support." "Will he make full recovery?" Schuyler asked. "His physical injuries will heal completely," the surgeon replied, "but his working dog career is over. The internal trauma and stress from this operation have pushed his body beyond the limits of what we can ask from military service." The news was bittersweet. Shadow would survive and potentially make full recovery, but his career as a specialized military working dog was ended by the injuries sustained during his final, most important mission. After years of training and operations that had protected American lives and national security, Shadow had earned retirement through sacrifice that exceeded the call of duty. "He's earned it," Schuyler said, her hand resting gently on Shadow's head as he emerged from anesthesia. "He's given everything for this mission." Shadow's eyes opened slowly, tracking her face with the intelligence and affection that had defined their partnership. His tail gave a weak but deliberate thump against the recovery bed, communicating that he understood both the success of their mission and the cost of achieving it. Over the following weeks, as Shadow recovered from his injuries and Schuyler debriefed her 3 years of intelligence gathering, the scope of the espionage network became fully clear. The Ravens had been just one component of a systematic operation that had compromised military personnel in 17 countries, resulting in the theft of classified capabilities worth over $500 million. Marcus's cooperation led to the arrest of 43 compromised American military personnel and the identification of foreign intelligence services that had purchased American military capabilities. The systematic nature of the espionage had reached into every branch of military service, multiple intelligence agencies, and several defense contractors with access to classified technologies. But the personal cost of achieving these strategic objectives was measured in the sacrifices of people like Shadow, who had given their health and careers to protect American lives and national security. The German Shepherd's final mission had preserved intelligence that could identify systematic treason, but it had also ended his career as one of the most capable military working dogs in American service. Shadow's decorations will include the Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Medal, and Combat Action Badge, Harrison informed Schuyler during their final debriefing. His service record will reflect operations that protected American lives and preserved national security at the highest levels. "He's earned every one of them," Schuyler replied, watching Shadow's continued recovery with professional pride and personal affection. His capabilities exceeded every expectation, and his sacrifice made this mission possible. But it was the broader implications of their investigation that continued to shape American military operations long after Shadow's recovery was complete. The systematic espionage they had uncovered led to comprehensive security reviews, enhanced background investigation procedures, and new protocols for protecting classified military capabilities from compromise. The Ravens organization was completely dismantled, with its financial assets seized and its personnel either arrested or eliminated. The foreign intelligence services that had purchased American military capabilities faced diplomatic consequences that included economic sanctions and restrictions on military cooperation with the United States. Marcus and his team received sentences that reflected the systematic nature of their treason: life imprisonment without possibility of parole for crimes that had compromised American national security and resulted in the deaths of American military personnel whose operations had been betrayed to hostile powers. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the recognition that military working dogs like Shadow possessed capabilities that exceeded traditional understanding of their potential contributions to national security. The success of Shadow's final mission led to expanded training programs, enhanced medical support, and recognition that military working dogs were strategic assets whose capabilities could determine the success or failure of critical operations. 6 months after the Ravens operation, Skylar received her new assignment, training officer for advanced military working dog programs, with responsibility for developing capabilities that could address emerging threats to American national security. Shadow, fully recovered but retired from active service, would serve as a training example and demonstration asset for capabilities that had proven decisive in protecting American lives. "Ready for your new career, partner?" Skylar asked, as they reported to their new assignment at the Military Working Dog Training Facility in San Antonio, Texas. Shadow's response was immediate and enthusiastic, his tail wagging with the energy and intelligence that had made him one of the most capable military assets in American service. He understood that his career was continuing, but in a role that would train the next generation of military working dogs to protect American lives and national security. The training facility included advanced capabilities that reflected lessons learned from Shadow's operations, specialized explosive ordnance disposal training, personnel neutralization techniques, tactical reconnaissance protocols, and sabotage capabilities that could be applied against emerging threats that conventional military forces couldn't address. But it was the partnership between Skylar and Shadow that served as the example for human canine teams that could achieve objectives requiring intelligence, courage, and sacrifice that went beyond normal expectations. Their 3 years of deep cover investigation, the systematic espionage they had uncovered, and the tactical operations that had preserved critical intelligence, all of it demonstrated capabilities that redefined understanding of what military working dog teams could accomplish. "Major Thorne," the facility commander said during their initial briefing, "your experience with advanced military working dog operations will provide the foundation for training programs that could revolutionize our approach to specialized missions." Shadow's capabilities were the result of training that pushed boundaries of what we thought was possible, Skylar replied, her hand resting on Shadow's head as he surveyed their new workplace with professional interest. "Our objective is to develop those capabilities in the next generation of teams." The training programs that followed were comprehensive and demanding, designed to develop human canine teams with capabilities that could address threats that conventional military forces couldn't handle. Shadow served as demonstration asset and training partner, his experience providing real-world examples of techniques and capabilities that had proven successful in the most demanding operational environments. But perhaps the most important aspect of their new assignment was the recognition that military working dogs were strategic assets whose contributions to national security deserved the same recognition and support provided to other specialized military capabilities. Shadow's decorations and service records served as examples for policies that ensured military working dogs received appropriate medical care, retirement support, and recognition for their sacrifices. Years later, when Skylar had advanced to colonel and Shadow had trained dozens of military working dog teams, they would often return to the Colorado mountains where their most dangerous mission had been completed. The cabin where Jackson had rescued them was rebuilt, and the area had become a training location for advanced military operations. But it was the memory of Shadow's final mission, his willingness to risk his life to preserve intelligence that could protect American military personnel, that continued to inspire the training programs they developed. Military working dogs like Shadow possessed capabilities that could determine the success or failure of operations that protected American lives and national security. "Still think about that night?" Skylar asked, as they stood at the overlook where Harrison's team had first made contact during the Ravens engagement. Shadow's response was immediate and characteristic, his attention shifting to tactical assessment of the surrounding terrain, his senses analyzing threats and opportunities with the professional competence that had made him legendary among military working dog handlers. His career had begun with specialized training that pushed the boundaries of what military working dogs could accomplish. It had continued through 3 years of deep cover operations that required intelligence and courage beyond normal expectations. And it had concluded with a mission that preserved intelligence critical to American national security while demonstrating capabilities that redefined understanding of military working dog potential. But perhaps most importantly, Shadow's service had proven that military working dogs were partners whose contributions to national security deserved recognition equal to any other military professional. His decorations, service record, and retirement with full honors reflected policies that ensured military working dogs received appropriate recognition for their sacrifices and contributions. The Colorado Mountains held memories of tactical operations that had tested every aspect of their training and partnership. But they also held promise for future generations of military working dog teams who would carry on the mission of protecting American lives and national security through capabilities that exceeded conventional understanding. As they returned to their vehicle for the drive back to San Antonio, Shadow's attention remained focused on the surrounding terrain with professional competence that would never fully retire. His training and experience had made him one of the most capable military assets in American service. But more than that, his partnership with Skylar had demonstrated what could be accomplished when human intelligence combined with canine capabilities in service of objectives that protected American lives. The setting sun painted the Colorado Mountains in shades of gold and crimson that reminded them both of the sacrifices and victories that had shaped their careers. But it was the promise of tomorrow, training the next generation of teams who would protect American national security, that gave meaning to everything they had accomplished together. Their mission continued, but in a role that would multiply their impact through teams who would carry on the tradition of service, sacrifice, and partnership that Shadow had exemplified throughout his legendary career. The Mountains would remember their story, but the future would benefit from the capabilities they had proven were possible when courage, training, and partnership combined in service of protecting American lives. Years of training and development would follow, but the foundation had been established through Shadow's demonstration that military working dogs possessed capabilities that could determine the success or failure of operations critical to American national security. His legacy would live on through every team that achieved objectives requiring intelligence, courage, and sacrifice beyond normal expectations. The drive back to San Antonio was quiet, but filled with professional satisfaction that came from missions completed and objectives achieved. Shadow rested in the passenger seat, his professional awareness maintained, but relaxed in the way that came with complete trust in his partner and confidence in their shared mission. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new training requirements, and new teams to develop. But tonight, as they traveled through the American countryside that their service had helped protect, both partners could take satisfaction in knowing their contributions had made a difference that would continue long after their active service had ended. The story of Shadow and Skylar had become legend among military working dog teams, but more importantly, it had become the foundation for capabilities that would protect American lives and national security for generations to come. Their partnership had proven what was possible when training, courage, and dedication combined in service of objectives that mattered more than individual recognition or personal safety. The mountains of Colorado held their secrets now, but the legacy of their service would continue through every team that faced impossible odds with the confidence that came from training, partnership, and mission focus that exceeded normal expectations. Shadow had earned his place in military history, but more than that, he had earned the right to retirement with the knowledge that his service had made a difference that would endure.